Reconnecting with the Ancients. A 3MEO PCE and 2C-B trip report by Sally Queens. Posted to earwid.org, March 5th, 2024. Yesterday, I decided to take the first proper plunge into combining dissociatives with psychedelics. I've combined OPCE with 5MEO MIPT twice, but I don't think the Moxie had enough influence to call it a proper exploration of this space. I will try my best to use timestamps, but all of this is coming from memory the next day, so it might not be the most accurate. The doses here are what works for me personally. 15 mg of 3MEO PCE is somewhat weak and boring on its own, maybe a medium dose, because my tolerance to dissos is pretty high. I also seem to not be very sensitive to oral 2C-B, but maybe it's just the food in my stomach inhibiting the absorption every time. 33 mg gives me very light visuals for reference. Intranasal 2C-B is another story. Definitely more than 2 times the potency of oral for me. In any case though, if you are trying to repeat a similar combo, adjust your doses accordingly, since I might be more tolerant to the compounds than the average user. T-1 minute and 20 seconds. I took 2 ginger capsules, which totaled to about 1.1 grams of powdered ginger. I doubt it did much, and it wasn't necessary since I don't really find 2C-B to be particularly nauseating. T+0 hours. I took a capsule of 3MEO PCE at around 8:40 PM while I was playing Minecraft with a friend. I had a heavy meal maybe 3 hours ago at this point, so I wasn't exactly on an empty stomach. This might have impacted the absorption of the 2C-B later on. At 40 minutes, I took a capsule of 24 mg of 2C-B while I waited for the disso to kick in. At 1 hour, feeling the effects of the 3MEO PCE start to become present, slight dizziness when turning my head, and my short-term memory started to get worse. I started playing Minecraft more enthusiastically and didn't have much trouble with it though, to be honest. At 1 hour 30, I'm fully feeling the 15 mg of 3MEO PCE now. Maybe threshold effects from the 2C-B, mostly a very slight body high, but no visuals. I stopped playing Minecraft and talked to my friend about drugs a little. We discussed the plan for taking 2CT2 in the future. I tried putting on some music to see if it was enhanced, and the only thing I found was that I could tell apart some of the layers, but it didn't really seem better than normal. At 2 hours, I decided to retreat into proper solitude now, listening to Infected Mushroom while I waited for the 2C-B to properly kick in. No visuals whatsoever, but a nice body high, characteristic of 2C-B, which wasn't muted by the numbness of the disso. The body high wasn't very intense though, and it didn't seem to go along with the music like I expected. I was a bit underwhelmed. Mentally, I was still very composed, I could text perfectly fine, and my speech was only ever so slightly slurred. At 3 hours, I somewhat impulsively measured out 5 mg of 2C-B to snort. I only measured it in one pile instead of what I would do normally for such tiny amounts, which is measure out 20, then split in half twice. No time for that now. I cannot tell you how much it actually was, but it couldn't have been more than 10 mg. If I had to guess, then I'd say 7 to 8. I snorted it, and there was a small sting, but nothing like my first time snorting it, when I did 24 mg. It made me sneeze a little, but saline nasal spray relieved this instantly after a good 10 minutes. The come-up was quick. I told my girlfriend what I had done, and she was upset due to the recklessness of it, which bothered me a bit in the beginning, but I quickly forgot about it once the journey started. We talked about it the next morning, and agreed that I should set stricter rules on redosing for myself, and pre-measure all of them if there's even the slightest possibility of me wanting to redose. This next timestamp encompasses the main part of the trip, and it lasted for about an hour. It is difficult to estimate how much time passed between and during each of these phases, but it couldn't have been much, even though it felt like a lot to me. At 3 hours and 20 minutes, I laid back in my bed, turned off all my electronics and put on an eye mask and earplugs, which I usually wear to sleep. Before I covered my eyes, I was overcome with the feeling that I was connecting with something ancient. I could see black lines crawling up on the walls around me, and I could picture myself in my mind's eye being enveloped by these black, corruption-looking lines. It felt as if I had awakened some sort of dark energy, and it was possessing me. But it wasn't frightening in the slightest. I was proud to be the receiver of it. I felt like I was honouring my ancestors, some ancient civilization which definitely knew about this. They reminded me of the Aztecs with some features from the old Egyptians. After this wave was over, I put on the eye mask and had some pretty dark imagery at first, but like I said before, it wasn't frightening whatsoever. Conventionally, these would be called CEVs, or closed eye visuals. But they weren't just that, they were a mixture of the visions, as I call them, that you get on dissociatives or high doses of pregabalin, which occur in your mind's eye and are more akin to a very vivid waking dream, and regular psychedelic closed-eye visuals, which are in your field of vision when you close your eyes. It's difficult to put into words how this type of closed-eye visual differs from a traditional psychedelic CEVs or dissociative visions, but after a while it stopped mattering as they became almost all-encompassing. The first thing I saw when I put on the eye mask was this cubical box from the inside, and there were a few fractal spirals which I see a lot on 2C-B. There was also the feeling like there were jesters there, and I could see their faces very faintly in the corners of this box. I presume this box represented the inside of my mind. It eventually broke out into other fractal imagery which was very gothic and pointy in style. I can't recall all of it, but one of the darkest images I remember was this meatscape, which was basically a fractal made out of meat and spikes, kind of gory looking, but again, not disturbing for some reason. The dark imagery eventually transitioned into natural imagery, and something really interesting happened at this point. I saw images of a forest and could hear some buzzing from bees, and eventually saw a beehive on a tree. This tree became the centre of focus, and eventually the buzzing became very loud and I could feel it on my body. Eventually, I felt like I'd become the tree and the beehive, very similar to a salvia experience, but without fully forgetting who I actually was. I got completely disconnected from my body, and the only thing reminiscent of a body in this state was the tree and beehive, even though it was projected in front of me rather than being within me. This image then multiplied towards the sides as if there were multiple versions of this tree and beehive in several universes, and I was all of them for a few seconds. The buzzing became almost overwhelming, so I took off the eye mask as an escape from this vision. After taking off the eye mask, the ancient runic imagery returned. I'm sure this is partly a result of me having played Zelda Tears of the Kingdom recently, as the visual style of some of it was similar to the Zonai from that game. I once again felt like I was being possessed by some ancient energy, something associated with black magic and witchcraft. And then, I was shown the inside of a cylindrical sort of scroll with an ancient-looking language I could not understand. There was so much text in there and it felt important, so I could not help but think, I wish I could understand this. Constantly, over and over. I was shown the text for what felt like a while, but was probably a few minutes in reality. That is about all of what I recall of the main part of the visions before I checked the time again. About an hour had passed. At 4 hours and 20 minutes, I messaged my girlfriend saying, "Phew, this has been a ride which I can't even begin to describe." Which is a little ironic seeing as I'm doing exactly that just now. But nonetheless, the message is the same. I will never do justice to the actual experience of my memories, let alone descriptions. I laid back down again, and continued having these visions, but they were less intense and vivid than before. They weren't aggressive anymore. They lacked that sort of push. At some point I remember seeing a long tunnel in some dungeon. I messaged my girlfriend saying that this would be amazing for D&D, since the imagery matches a lot of the themes in D&D, and the level of creativity in this state is, well, it's unparalleled. Another thing I saw at this point was an image of me in my bed, which slowly zoomed out into the planet, galaxy, universe, and then folded the universe into itself and zoomed out further into a sort of self-fulfilling fractal, which I presume was the multiverse. The message that this particular vision had was that I should not worry about myself, as there is this absolutely massive totality out there, of which I am only a minuscule part of. Pretty cliche, I know, but somewhat profound nonetheless. After that, I started having some pretty manic ideas regarding this specific combination of mine. I felt as if I had discovered my very own dark elixir of power. I had a semi-delusional feeling of importance from having been the chosen one to receive the energy I'd received, and thought that I am definitely repeating this combination. Out of all these thoughts, I only agree with the last one now that I am fully sober. Once again, I'm sure there was a lot more content here, but I cannot recall most of it. Externally, I was just tossing around in my bed. I also vividly remember one bathroom break because I was peeing for what seemed like a comically long duration. All the while, the toilet seat morphed in and out. At 5 hours and 20 minutes, I decided I should go to sleep soon. It was about 2 AM. I got up and took some melatonin and NAC, which would hopefully counteract the disso somewhat. This didn't do much to make me tired, as there was still a good bit of 2C-B in my system, which was the main thing that would prevent me from sleeping. I was coming down quickly, but still had an hour or two to go before I could sleep. 7 hours in, after tossing and turning with imagery of decaying intensity in my mind, I was finally able to sleep. I had vivid dreams, but I actually attribute that more to the melatonin than everything. I woke up at about 12 PM that day after roughly 8 hours of sleep, and I felt pretty tired still. But all in all, was in a pretty decent mood. And in conclusion, this combination was initially underwhelming, but then went beyond any of my expectations. The perceived entity presence and feeling like I became the imagery that I was seeing in my mind was something I knew was possible on something like this, but that I did not expect at this level. I'm very satisfied and will be repeating this at some point, with a few adjustments. One thing though that I really should emphasise is that people should tread carefully and be cautious when it comes to combining dissociatives and psychedelics. And also with snorting 2C-B or any 2CX compound for that matter. Well, the TLDR, using ChatGPT because I'm lazy. This trip report describes a combination of 15mg 3-MeO PCE, 24mg 2C-B, and a smaller unknown dose of insufflated 2C-B. I took ginger capsules to mitigate potential nausea. The effects began with dizziness and impaired short memory. I experienced a mild body high and discussed drugs with a friend. After retreating into solitude, the visuals became more pronounced with gothic and natural imagery. I messaged my girlfriend and had more visions of a dungeon and contemplated the vastness of our universe. I felt manic and had grandiose ideas about the combination. I eventually took melatonin and NAC to help sleep, experienced vivid dreams, and woke up feeling tired but in a decent mood. Finally, I concluded that the combination exceeded my expectations, and cautioned others to approach such combinations with caution themselves. (3-MeO PCE). I don't think we've actually discussed this before, so naturally, referring to psychonautwiki.org/wiki/3-MeO-PCE, major kudos to the PsychonautWiki team. I'm very honoured that I can actually share the information through them, because at the end of the day, I don't really know much myself. I'm learning, like I've said in the past commentaries, I learn just as much about these substances and their effects through researching and sharing it with you guys, as much as you get it through me. Interestingly, there's a warning on psychonautwiki.org saying that 3-MeO PCE may have a higher risk of causing mania, delusions and psychosis than other dissociatives. This is interesting in relation to the report because in the context of the report, the guy seemed to experience these manic delusions of grandiosity towards the end of his trip, feeling like he was the chosen one. He developed the dark elixir of power, and the other terms that he referred to the experience as, especially in combination with the 2C-B, which, again, combining any substance it's like playing Russian roulette. It could either be a thrill and be a memorable part of your life that you manage to work around and gain some positive experiences from, or it could be a bullet to the head and the end of your sanity and life as you know it. So you need to be very careful mixing any sort of substances, especially different types like a dissociative and a psychedelic. Just personally, for me, I've never used 3-MeO PCE. I've never really used many dissociatives other than ketamine and ketamine analogues and similar substances that are like ketamine that I was probably sold that I didn't realise were ketamine, like MXE, 2FDCK, deschloroketamine, yada yada. And I have mixed 2CB and ketamine together, and it can induce some levels of paranoid delusion. You can start to entertain some very, manic thoughts that are not grounded in reality, and it's really it's because you're messing around with your brain chemistry so much. You're introducing all of this stuff to your sober, stable mind and inducing it into an altered state, and you really are at the behest of the chemical interactions that occur in your brain, and it can result in psychosis and delusions. You've just got to hope that they only last the duration of the experience and aren't long-lasting. But anyway, 3-methoxy, this is going to be hard, 3-methoxy-ticyclidine, also known as methoxy-ticyclidine, and 3-MeO PCE, is a novel dissociative substance of the aryl cyclohexylamine class that produces dissociative and hallucinogenic effects when administered. It is a structural analogue of PCE. 3-MeO PCE began to gain popularity in 2010 and is sold on the online grey area research chemical market as a legal alternative to PCP or ketamine. I'm not sure about the legality of it right now, but I assume it would probably be outlawed the amount of times these governments have these blanket bans on research chemicals. They're pretty consistent, many governments across the world. It depends which country you're from. They all have varying degrees of legal status. In fact, what would be interesting, it would be to read the legal status on PsychonautWiki. Legal status: Czech Republic, 6-APB is a Schedule 1 List 4 substance. It may be used for research and restricted therapeutic purposes. In Germany, 3-MeO PCE is controlled under the NPSG, New Psychoactive Substances Act. As of July 18, sorry about that German accent. So New Psychoactive Substances Act, yeah. As of July 18, 2019, production and import with the aim to place it on the market, administration to another person, and trading is punishable. Possession is illegal but not penalised. In Switzerland, 3-MeO PCE is a controlled substance specifically named under Verzeichnisse. Oh, I probably offended so many of my Swiss and German viewers there. In Turkey, 3-MeO PCE is classed as a drug and is illegal to possess, produce, supply or import. And finally, in the United Kingdom, 3-MeO PCE is a Class B drug in the UK and is illegal to possess, produce, supply or import. As an N-alkyl derivative of 1-phencyclohexylamine substituted in the phenyl ring with an alloxy substituent, it is covered by the aryl cyclohexylamine generic clause added to the Misuse of Drugs Act by SI 2013-239, which came into effect on the 26th of February 2013. Like I said, the UK often has these blanket bans on psychoactive substances that fall under the research chemical class. Just to roll it back a bit, what are aryl cyclohexylamines? So they are actually a class of compounds which typically produce dissociation, anesthesia, and hallucinogenic effects. So this is stuff that primarily acts on the NMDA receptors, stuff like ketamine, phencyclidine PCP, methoxetamine, 4-MeO PCP, 3-MeO PCE, 3-MeO PCP, and this is the sort of class that they are sort of narrowed down into, but I guess the wider class is dissociatives, which covers many, many different varieties of substances. It's a bit like saying psychedelics, like saying, oh, 2C-B is a psychedelic, but actually it's a phenethylamine or a phenethylamine. But in layman's terms, or in a generalization sort of fashion, for grouping in substances, we would just say, oh, it's a psychedelic, produces psychedelic type effects. But yes, there's various different substituted aryl cyclohexylamines, as there are many dissociatives and different varieties, and that have mixtures of effects. Some of them have psychedelic effects, stimulant effects, etc. Yeah, so that's fascinating. I didn't know that. Just to round up this whole commentary section, what is PCE, also known as eticyclidine or CI400, that sounds like some Doctor Who robot or something, is a synthetic dissociative substance of the aryl cyclohexylamine chemical class that produces dissociative, anesthetic, and hallucinogenic effects when administered. Like its closely related structural analogue PCP, PCE primarily exerts its effects as an NMDA receptor antagonist, where it non-competitively binds to and blocks the activity of the NMDA receptor. This is what gives the dissociative sort of feeling whenever you're on ketamine. It is an NMDA receptor antagonist. I'm not a scientist or a chemist. I was never the best at science in school on a practical level. I loved the theory, I loved learning about it, but I was never very academically competent in many of the subjects. But I did like biology, I must say. But regardless, even though I'm a bit of a scientific brainlet, if you want to say that about me, I still find it so fascinating. Like I find all areas of life fascinating, regardless of whether I grok or comprehend them. But yeah, it's an NMDA receptor antagonist where it non-competitively binds to and blocks the activity of the NMDA receptor. So this is what produces the dissociative effect. And you need to be very careful with dissociatives because you do not want to fry them NMDA receptors, because it can produce some very horrific results, let me tell you, especially being a recovering ketamine addict. It can produce psychosis and mania and depression if you... I don't want to use the word, but I wanted to use a more extreme word, but let's just say it assaults your brain chemistry so much that it can result in completely derailing your entire life and produce feelings of anhedonia, which is the inability to feel pleasure from anything. It can hijack your dopamine receptors as well. It becomes like your reward system. Dissociative addiction is a very dark place to be in, as is any addiction. PCP was marketed in the 1950s as an anesthetic pharmaceutical drug, but was taken off the market in 1965 due to the high prevalence of dissociative hallucinogenic side effects, which was also discovered of PCE. Soon after, ketamine was discovered by Park Davis researchers as a better tolerated derivative for use as an anesthetic pharmaceutical drug. Since this time, a number of synthetic derivatives of PCP have been sold as dissociative drugs for recreational and non-medical use. This is the thing I was talking about in the LSZ and the 25I MBOH video commentary section, where when these scientists, these researchers in these labs that are like government funded, they go about synthesizing and researching these chemicals. They quickly, I don't know if there's any conspiracy going on around this. I mean, many people would say there's something. I've met quite a few people. I don't personally subscribe to this because I don't know enough. I can't say I subscribe to it because I don't know. But it's very interesting to contemplate about how perhaps maybe government funded researches in substances and the synthesization of them are designed in a way to then leak into the public domain through street dealers and the sources they come from, the black market laboratory staff, the black market chemists, because they eventually get hold of the ability, the recipe to engineer these substances and then tweak them and modify them and make these analogues and variations and derivatives of certain substances. So yeah, no wonder they end up getting sold online. So it's like it just proves that the war on drugs just cannot ever finish from the side of the elites, the ruling class. It's never going to work out in the favor, because let's say there is no conspiracy and people do just like find the ability to synthesize it themselves, and it's just going to keep happening. The lower people, the people in the normal people, the lower class people, working class, middle class, people in poverty, are always going to take drugs, make them, find them, and use them. So it really is a losing game. But how many times have we talked about the failure of the war on drugs? Everybody knows that at this point there needs to be some seriously better and smarter and wiser approach to drug decriminalisation and some form of legalisation, which will come with a boatload of issues for us to deal with as a society. But it's something that needs to be done in some sense, because the repression of it, much like repressing anything, just makes it bubble up even harder to the surface and explode in a miasma of dark energy. Today, PCE is typically taken as a recreational drug, or more rarely for entheogenic purposes, alongside its popular contemporary relatives 3-MeO-PCP and 3-MeO-PCE. PCE may be ingested orally, smoked, insufflated, or injected. It has been noted for its potency, diversity in effects, long-lived effects, and abuse liability. Notably, PCE is slightly more potent than PCP and has similar effects, but its unpleasant taste and tendency to cause nausea made it less accepted by users, making it relatively obscure. And just as a little thing we've been doing on these commentary sections, would I take PCE or 3-MeO-PCE or 3-MeO-PCP or PCP? Probably not. I would never take another dissociative again, because I clearly had a problem with ketamine, so I have obviously some... My neuro chemistry, how my brain's wired up, my personality, my state of being, the drug that has the hold on... The drugs that have the hold on me and become addictive are dissociatives. Any other drug, I was addicted to cannabis. I've talked to you about this before. I completely just let that go. I could let that go, even though it had a hold on me and it worked for my brain. It stopped working for my brain and let it go. I was sober for a long time. Then I got addicted to ket, because then certain events in my life and trauma allowed the dissociative feeling to really get a grip on my mind and become the thing that I used to escape from feeling my emotions. Because the thing is about dissociatives, that many of you know, in contrast to other types of substances, is dissociatives can give you that feeling of nothingness, of literal like peace and just feeling nothing. But no one wants to feel nothing forever. I'd rather actually feel the sad emotions, anger, and I'm not really an angry person, but I'd rather feel the full spectrum of human emotions than live in a state of pure numbness and have no meaning in life, because it can give you a sense of meaning. The nothingness can give you meaning. It's weird, because inherently life is meaningless, and that feeling of nothingness, which is definitely inherently meaningless, gives you a sense of meaning. And also there's this physical euphoria and mental just ecstasy to it, not ecstasy but euphoria, to just being like, whew, just takes that weight off your shoulders, cowboy. And yeah, that's why I think a lot of people fall into it. I've seen a lot of people on the ketamine addiction subreddit that fall into dissociative or ketamine addiction specifically because of trauma, loss, and not being able to face the emotional upheaval and just emotional labor of having to process and navigate whatever trauma they're dealing with. And while it can be good for therapy and for depression, ketamine, it should not be abused, because it will literally lead you down a rabbit hole that I can tell you is very dark, depraved, and saddening, and I'm still just coming out of it. Recovery is a long road, especially when you abuse it for so long. The longer you abuse it, the harder you abuse it, the longer and harder the recovery will be. But it will be the makings of you in the end. And to all dissociative addicts that may be listening to this, my heart goes out to you. and let me know about your experiences in the comments. And if you've ever taken 3MEO PCE, what was it like for you? I would personally probably discourage people using this, especially since PsychonautWiki says it's strongly discouraged to use this substance in high doses or multiple days in a row. And we know just how off the rails we can get when we find a substance that works for us. We can end up doing it multiple days in a row with no sleep and using higher and higher doses, damaging our bodies and brains and minds and souls and very spirits. So, yep, hope you learned a lot about this substance and the combination between each of these, which is rather fascinating. I do like doing these combination reports because they're very unique, and even this Interlude trip report only had 15 views, so it was fresh out the oven, as we'd say up north. So yeah, hope you guys are doing well. Much love to you all. Hope you had a good weekend and have enjoyed your summer, whatever you've got up to. Major love, and I'll see you on the other side.